This is the foldable for section 11.1. And for 11.1, what we're doing is finding the area and the perimeter of a triangle and a parallelogram, which this is from a long time ago. We should know that the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. What matters in this section is that our height is at 90 degrees, so we always want that line to be straight up. You're gonna have to tilt the picture over sometimes to see that it's at 90 degrees. I also want to remind you of a few things. We're gonna talk about 30, 60, 90 triangles. So let's make this 60 and this 90. And usually on this section, how they work is that they give you a measurement right here, let's say 22. And we're supposed to find this measurement right here, let's call it X. And there's some rules that we need to remember, that to find the small side, the short side, from the hypotenuse, all you do is divide by 2. And that would give you 11. To get the long leg, we need the short leg. That's why we had to solve for it first. And then multiply by the square root of 3. So the short leg times the square root of 3 gave you the long leg. The other thing that you need to remember is a 45, 45, 90. When it's a 45, 45, 90, the other two sides are the same. So if I call this X, this will also be X. They usually give us the hypotenuse, let's say 4 this time. The rule says that you take the hypotenuse and divide by the square root of 2 to get one of the legs. Once you have one, you have the other, and I just needed to remind you about that. In this section, the decimal approximations of these values work great, so that's what we're going to do. The perimeter is adding all the sides together. Please don't use the height, which is a value usually inside. So we got a side plus the base, which is just another side, and then the side. So I'll add all the 3 sides together. Let's take a look inside. So the reason that I reminded you of the 30, 60, 90 rules is because that is 60, and that's 60. So we need to figure out how much is this height. To get this height, let's call it Y, we need the short leg, X. So remember the rule was that you take the hypotenuse and divide by 2, which equals 4. That's the value of X. So to get the long leg, you take the short leg and multiply by the square root of 3. And that's the long leg. Why did we need that? That is the height. So to find the area is just base, which all of this would be 8, if that is equal to 4. So base 8 times the height, 4 square root of 3, divided by 2. If you put that in your calculator, you should get that A is approximately 27.71. Now to get the perimeter, all we do is add all the 3 sides. This is 8, this is 8. So that means that this one would have to be 8 since these two are 60. And that equals 24. 30, 60, 90 rules. Again, because that's a 30, that means that this has to be 60. I need to find the short leg and then the hypotenuse. The short leg is the long leg divided by the square root of 3. And that's going to give you a decimal approximation of 4.04. It just makes it easier to understand what we're doing once we do the decimal approximations. Okay, now that you got the short leg, which is 4.04, you can multiply by 2 to get the hypotenuse, which is approximately 8.08 is the Y. Why do we need that? Well, the X value is your base, so I'm going to flip this picture over so you can tell that this would be the base and this would be the height. So it would be 7 times that X value, which is 4.04, And that's equal to the area, which gives you approximately, divided by 2, which gives you approximately the 14.15 as a value of A. For the perimeter, all you're doing is adding the sides, so you have 7 plus that 4.04 plus that 8.08, which would give you approximately 19.12. For this one, what we need is to find this value right here, x, and this one, y. I hope you can tell that we have a little triangle right here, so we're going to use the Pythagorean Theorem to solve for x. So I have x squared is equal to 12 squared plus 5 squared. X squared is equal to 144 plus 25. X squared is equal to 169, and then we do the square root of both sides. X is equal to 13. How do we get the y value? We're kind of going to ignore this x and use this big old triangle to get that Pythagorean theorem. So it'd be 12 squared plus 25 squared is equal to y squared. 144 plus 625 is equal to y squared. 769 is equal to y squared, the square root of both sides. Y is approximately 27.73. Okay, now that we have those links, we can find the area. The area is the base of the actual triangle, so now we're going to use 20 instead of 25. So 20 times the height, which is still 12. Even if it was over here, would still be the highest point of the triangle. And remember, it's at 90 degrees divided by 2, and that gives you 120. For the perimeter, we're just adding the sides together. So 13 plus 27.73 plus 20 is equal to 60.73. The height of a triangle is 2 times the base, so the height is 2 times the base. If the area of the triangle is 400 units, so the area is 400, and that's equal to the base times the height, which is really this, divided by 2. The 2's end up canceling out. We have 400 is equal to b squared. So then we do the square root of both sides. 20 is equal to the base. The height, remember, is 2 times that. So 40 is equal to the height. For the other side, it's kind of similar. We still need to do base times height, but we're not dividing by 2, so base times height. Don't divide by 2 here. And then the perimeter, we got 2 of the A's and 2 of the bases. And don't forget, you're not using the H. We got a 30, 60, 90 triangle. We need this little section because that's the small side, the short side. So how do we get that? We take the long leg and divide by the square root of 3. That decimal approximation is 2.89, and that's the value of x. Now that we have the value of x, to get the hypotenuse, we're going to just multiply by 2. That's y, and that's 5.77. Okay, why do we need that? The area is the base, which we already know is 6.5. The height is 5. And we don't divide by 2, so the area is 32.5. The perimeter is 2, and we needed all this work to get this value right here that is 5.77. 5.77, and there's 2 of them. And the 6.5. And that's going to give you 24.54. For the next one, we need this little section right here. We're going to call it X. And then this one right here. So we're doing the same thing. We're going to get 8 and divide by 2. That gives you 4 is the value of x because that's the hypotenuse. We got to divide by 2. Then the short leg times the square root of 3 is equal to the long leg. Why do we need those values? For the area, we need to have that y value, that long leg, which is a base. That equal to 4, remember? So this whole base is 9. The base times the height, which was the 4 square root of 3, which is a decimal approximation of 6.93. And that's what I'm going to use here. And we don't need to divide by 2, so the area is 62.35. The perimeter is 2 of the bases, which are 9, and 2 of the other sides, which are 8. And that gives you 34. For this one right here, this right here and this right here are the same length. So once you find one, you find the other. We have the hypotenuse. We have to divide by the square root of 2 for 45, 90. And that gives you a decimal approximation of 8.49. And we're going to call it y, because that's what we've been calling it. The area then is equal to the base, which we're going to call this one the base of 8.49, times the height, which happens to be the same, 8.49. We don't need to multiply by 2. That gives you 72.04. For the perimeter, we take 2 of the 8.49s and 12. And that's going to give you approximately 40.98. The base of a parallelogram is 6 units longer. So for this one, we're supposed to have the base is 6 units longer than the height. So the height, and then 6 units more. So remember the area, which happens to be 18 in this case, is the base, which is really this thing, times the height, which is just h. So now we're going to do the distributive property, h squared plus 6h. We're going to subtract 18 from both sides. 0 is equal to h squared plus 6h minus 18. And what you're doing here is factoring. So we got to find the factors of these two, which in case you don't remember, you go to the y equals. You do that negative 18 divided by x. Hit second graph, and you're looking for 2 numbers added together to give you 6. So that's 7. Did I put negative 18 on there? Yep. 6. That's negative 3. It's negative 7. Let's use something else here to find these values. The quadratic formula. B squared negative b plus or minus the square root of 4b squared. 6 squared minus 4a is 1. C is negative 18 divided by 2a, which is 1. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of. And so what I think is that it didn't factor, so 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 18 gives you 108 divided by 2. Then we do negative 6 plus the square root of 108. And then divided by 2. X is approximately 2.17.